Sorry about that.
That's all
Go
right.
ahead.
It wants to have me click something. So that didn't come from me. I am aware of everything that we agreed to in 2019, and I'm unaware of any changes in how we use the space based on our agreement from before. We use the Council on Aging as a free resource for them, although they've been donating to us anyway. And of course, the Sherborn Recreation Yoga continues to meet every Monday, and that has not changed. The classes that meet there typically use our porta potties that we have on site as we were asked to do. We actually did almost nothing on site from 2020 to 2022 at the end of the year. So there was other than our standard volunteers that come there. So that is my understanding, that we were to limit and minimize any possible use of the septic system. So that is how we've been operating, which is why we are close personal friends with Clean Portable Restrooms, who have been bought out by United Rentals, like apparently. Always an adventure in the clean portable restroom world. We use wash stands for as many months as Mother Nature allows us to use hand wash stations. After that, it becomes hand sanitizer, which survives out in the cold. So that kind of gives us an overview. Twice a year, we continue to have our open events that require some conversations with the health inspector for vendors that vend food. And again, porta potties used for that. So that gives you the background to up until the discussion for the preschool. And I will let Sarah talk more specifically about how she is really governed by an educational set of rules and mandates that are generally stricter than everything else that we will bring to bear. But I will say that most of the clientele for this are wearing diapers, just so you know.
Okay, and I'll note that, I mean, you've been, Unity Farm's been great for the events that you've had, and I know that worked well with Tom and Mark on all of those issues. So that's been great. And based on what you've said, I guess, and Mark, I don't know if you'd agree, it sounds like we might need to do some quantification of the usage at 17, so that then we could figure out what has to be calculated and what's the kind of the reserve volume that might be there that could be applied to this school. So
I agree. Yes.
If you go that route, right? I mean, that's one particular route and one particular way to go with the state plumbing board, I assume. But there is an annual, I should say, there's an annual pumping of the septic system with Scott Septic.
Can I interject a question, Daryl? Sorry.
Yes.
I think one thing, Kathy, I know just as my experience as a parent, I know that you guys were hosting the summer go-round day camp a couple of years back, but I know that was noted in the 2019 minutes, which it was, I think, a maximum of 35 campers and 5 staff. I don't believe that is hosted there any longer, correct?
No longer, yes. The situation was that we felt we weren't going to be able to provide the right setting for that large a group, both in curriculum and in space needs. So I want to say they meet at Pine Hill. I actually don't know, but since 2019, they have not been here. So we do not host.
Yeah, they've been meeting at Pine Hill, and long before that, they met at the library, maybe someday.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Daryl. Just wanted to interject that change.
Yep, that's good. Okay, so Sarah, if you can fill us in on
Yes.
Activities, size, we know something from the materials that you provided about barbers, so I assume it's similar, but maybe not identical.
Yeah, thanks for having us tonight. My co-founder, Shayla Sanellian, is also on the call here, so she might jump in at any point. And thank you, Kathy. So we are licensed by the State Department of Early Education and Care. And so we need to follow all of their regulations, their regular regulations, and then they also have a separate policy document for nature preschools or outdoor preschools. So we follow the regular regulations, and in addition, we also follow the outdoor preschool regulations. We are not a camp. We're not allowed to use the word camp in any of our marketing or any of our literature. We have to stay away from using that word legally because we're not classified as a camp. We're classified as a child care under Department of Early Education and Care. Part of the regulations that we have to follow require a sink. So we will have a portable sink inside of the yurt for hand washing. So, I'd asked in the email, I was wondering, where you would prefer for the gray water to be disposed of from that sink. And I was also wondering if we would need to use biodegradable soap for hand washing or whether we could just use regular soap. Was also something we were wondering about. And so at Unity Farm Sanctuary, if we're able to get let's say 10 gallons per day per child allocated for our program by Eric Dickinson at Civilized Solutions. That could potentially be a really good route to go. That was suggested by Chris Canny. If we're able to make that happen, then the next step would be to get a Title V inspection from perhaps Holliston Sewer or Scott Septic. So the first step would be have the civil engineer reallocate gallons per child per day to our programming. And then the second step would be to get that Title V inspection and submit those materials to the Board of Health. Realistically, we would use the porta potty as well. So, I know that the farm visitors typically use the porta potty, and since the porta potty would be right next to the yurt, I think that would be very convenient for us. And yeah, do you have any questions?
Okay, so, right, I guess one thing we certainly want to have coordination, and Mark has worked with Eric Dickinson a lot. So in terms of, sorry, I have to let someone in terms of calculating what's current, again, what gallonage is currently going out. So it's going to take a little more refinement on the numbers. And we have to make sure that they understand that it's not 990 gallons, I believe was the number that was in a previous communication from maybe Paul Saulnier.
Well, that's correct.
It's 660. And there's policy from Mass DEP on why that is the number. That difference of 330 gallons is because it was to accommodate a garbage disposal. And you can't reallocate it to other kinds of uses. So it's just a rule. That's just the way it is. So it's 660 gallons that we're looking at right now to work out and figure out how that flows. And so, Mark, I'll let you go on with.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point. And I mentioned earlier, well, one is the question I would have is, and Eric can put this in his calculations, is how many participants are expected for this program and what would be the maximum that would be considered. The other question is the fact that the certificate of compliance still notes it as a residential building, a house with 6 bedrooms. It never officially got changed over to indicate its true use, which appears to be office space at this point. I think that needs to be resolved as well, so that we have a permanent record to indicate its use. Right now, all we have on file is a certificate in respect to the use, showing it as a residential 6-bedroom facility. So those two things are very important, determining present use as well as what the proposed use would be if indeed the board so wishes to allow the house or facility, I'll say, to be used as a facility for office space, recreational use, the council on aging use, and also the any camps or programs, assist programs being considered.
Okay, so question for you. If we do the certificate so it appropriately matches what the uses are for the facility and the septic system, and at some point in the future, whoever owns the building at the time, the property, wants to go back to residential use, this doesn't preclude that, does it?
I don't believe so, but that's a question I probably would bring to the Department of Environmental Protection, because normally we don't see changes of this nature where a residential goes to another type of facility and then back. And that's a very good point. We wouldn't want the owner to lose previous use if they so wish to keep it with the previous use.
Okay, so that's something to confirm then with
Yes.
DEP.
Yes.
That it can go in both directions, or the changes can happen multiple times. Okay.
Yes.
So Sarah, do you have any rough idea of how many children and how many staff for BOPN would be involved?
We were hoping to find out what the septic capacity limit would be.
Okay.
And that number would help us think about the number of children.
Okay.
But it would be at least 10.
All right. So what happens is Mass DEP has tables for that match up, like for every chair in a restaurant, you need to have X number of gallons of capacity. And embedded in those numbers, there are a lot of assumptions, like what did it take to cook the food, and what's included in the food, and washing and everything else. So those are the numbers that we're going to be using for doing these calculations.
Chris Canny mentioned 10 gallons per child per day, but I think he was just mentioning that on the phone, so we'll confirm if that's the case.
Yeah, I think that's the number Mark mentioned the other day as well.
Yes, if we're looking at, there's different charts, and that would be for a childcare facility.
Does it make any difference that we're going to also be using the porta potties? Would that lower the number of gallons per day?
I don't believe they have anything in the charts to indicate you would get a reduction in flow if you're providing porta toilets, but another question I could pose to the state if that's your proposal.
Okay, I think that there'll be enough capacity on the existing, probably, that we wouldn't need to go that route. But we'll see once Eric Dickinson has a chance to get out there.
Okay, so does anyone have any other? Oh, Kathy, is that? Oh, are you raising your hand? Okay, I didn't know if you were gesturing to someone in your home. Okay.
No, I'm looking at the certificate provided to us that we have to post in the building. Building code edition 9th, sprinkles installed, no. Use occupancy classification B, type of construction VB, approved occupant load 49, maximum live 4 load 40 PSF, assembly use 49 occupants equals business use, kitchen use and upper floor is limited to employees only, which is true. There is only use downstairs in the meeting room for visitors. Full occupancy 5/31/19, Chris Kenny. Occupancy full building, is that an indication that it is still thought of as a private building, or does that actually move it? We spent a great deal to actually make it a household. So we've installed a handicapped ramp, exit signs, changed the railings, changed the door thresholds to allow for wheelchairs. So if the paperwork didn't occur back then, it was something that we were not informed of.
No, it sounds like it might be something just in terms of the certificate of compliance on our end. So
Okay.
it's good
Yeah,
to
this
know
is
that that is
called
there and that there are numbers
certificate of occupancy.
specified
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, Mark, we need to get a copy of that from the building inspector.
That will be a very helpful document. I did not realize there was a document out there. It never got to our department, but that will be very helpful. And that's a shame because, you know, we can check their files as well, and make sure that's on our files since we did not realize it was reclassified. We allowed use at the meeting, I think it was in May of 2019, for the changing use that was proposed. We would definitely want to put that official certificate from the building department onto our files. So that will be very helpful. The question will be is, can you ever go back to residential? It sounds like you put so much work into the facility, you may want to keep it the way it is.
So this past year in January, we deeded the building to Unity Farm Sanctuary. We are no longer the owners. It is owned by the nonprofit, which has the intention of staying in that location in perpetuity. When John and I pass away, the other property house, 11 Unity, will also become part of Unity Farm Sanctuary for the foreseeable future. I can send you a copy of the little photograph I have, and it is certificate number 827, if that helps you on the other end.
We can try to pull that certificate. If not,
Sure.
we'll inquire.
I have a photo of it, though.
That's fine. And Daryl, just so you know, I saw Tom on the meeting. I don't know if he's still here. I don't know if he had any
Yeah, I
comment.
did want to ask him about, Tom, do you have any comments from your perspective?
Yes, I've seen the preliminary SOPs submitted by, Boston Outdoor Preschool Network, and I've read the guidance document that the operator has alluded to, and I just was wondering if there was any more details available. I noticed on that guidance from EEC there is a requirement for a site map of all indoor and outdoor spaces that are going to be utilized by this program. There's language about accessibility for first responders. You know, just maybe a map of the terrain and just to try to elaborate on emergency and contingency plans. Is there food being served? Is the food sourced from home? Is there any preparation of food? So I feel like I'd feel a lot better to get more of these things in writing that kind of mirrors the reg and mirrors that guidance document that was developed a couple of years ago from EEC, which is very thorough, and rightfully so. I'm certainly a fan of the experiential learning experience and the immersive learning. I think it's very important for the children. I think this is a great concept, but I think from a public health perspective, we just need a lot more tangible, documented details so we can mull this over.
Okay, I'm Shayla. I'm Sinelli, and I just want to ask a question just to clarify. So you're asking for the emergency and contingency plan. You're asking for that whole paper. That's what you're asking for. You want that whole written form.
Yes, that, and then whatever information you may have turned into EEC to obtain the licensure for this to be able to facilitate this outdoor program, we would also request that information. So the site map, the emergency plans, all the information that the guidance document from EEC calls for. I think the board would benefit from reviewing that information as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So the order of operations is first comes the building permit, and then comes EEC licensure. So what I did is I emailed the Board of Health our emergency plan for all of our other locations. And our emergency plan for Unity Farm Sanctuary will look very similar. We can write up a separate one for Unity Farm Sanctuary and email that out separately, and it would be approved at the time of getting our license. So first the yurt is built. So first comes the building permit, and then the yurt is built, and then we get the EEC license. So we can absolutely submit all the documents that we will submit to EEC to you, but they wouldn't be approved until a later date. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I read an email that said that you are licensed by EEC. Can you elaborate on what type of license that actually is? And then you're saying you have to obtain another license for this camp here?
Yeah. So for each location we open, so let's just say, we have a license space in Milton, which is a half-day program. So whatever license we have for the site in Malden, it cannot be transferred from Milton. So for each location that we open, we need a different license because each town has its own requirement. And EEC knows all of our paperwork because we have been using them for all our different sites. So they approve, they know all our hand washing policy, they know the emergency contingent plan. It's just, it changes per location because every location is different. But so it's already been approved because we open multiple sites that are licensed. It's just like whatever location, we just have to make sure all those information is there for the emergency contingency plan. So I can send it to you,
So there's
everything that you need.
Okay, perfect. So so that makes sense. You have a license for each individual location. So there's no broad umbrella license to specifically operate outdoor programs. There's individual licenses to operate this type of concept.
Yeah, so we are under one umbrella, but if we open like 4 sites in 4 different cities, each site has its own license, but it is under one umbrella as Boston Outdoor Preschool Network. I don't know if that makes sense. But each site has its own license that's not transferable. And it depends on how many kids you have in each location. So that has to be on the license as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
If I can interject, just go ahead.
Yeah, so the family handbook that we submitted is our master copy. So in that family handbook, if you scroll to the end of the handbook, you're going to see all of the emergency policies for Wellesley, Milton, Malden, and the Arboretum. And then in terms of food, I wanted to answer Tom's question about food. We do not serve food, which is why you're not going to see that in any of our policies. So families have to bring their own food from home, including snacks.
Okay, and where would there be an area where that would be stored or kept? Do we encourage them to bring shelf-stable foods or means to hold under temperature control if needed?
Yeah, so families are expected to pack foods that are not going to spoil before lunchtime.
And they have ice pack. If they do send some like yogurt, milk, they just make sure there's like ice pack, in the child's lunchbox as well.
For the site map, we can send that to you. We haven't, there was an architect who drew the site, the location of the yurt, so you can see where the yurt is in comparison to the building. It's very, very close to the indoor building. So we'll send you the site map and we'll send you the emergency plan for Unity Farm Sanctuary. And was there anything else we should put on our list?
I did see something reading this over that there was some sort of activity involving searching for mushrooms. Can you elaborate on what that exactly means?
Yeah, sometimes we'll go, we'll look for different things. Like we're collecting yellow leaves, or we're looking for, birds, or trying to find woodpeckers. So mushrooms, just an example of something that we might look for. We do tell the children about what they can and cannot eat. So if you find a berry in the woods, you may not eat it, right? You can bring a teacher over and we can talk about it, but they're not allowed to eat things that they find in nature. So we talk about what you can and can't eat. And then for snack time, we're going to have them on a lawn or some area of the forest where it's far away from anything that they might want to put into their mouths. So that's something that we teach them. And the teachers also receive training on that during our staff orientation as well.
Can understand if I have concerns about some of the mushrooms that we might find are poisonous or they might be harmful. So do we dissuade the children from handling those specifically? Or are we just looking at them? Are we picking them?
No, they look at them with their eyes. So mushrooms are something we can look at, but not touch. About once a year, we'll do the spores experiment, where you take the cap and you put it on a sheet of white paper so that you can see the spores. They come out overnight, and so on the next morning you can see the spores. So that's an example of a science activity that we'll do probably once a year with the class. But a teacher will be, picking the mushroom and managing that.
Yeah, and then like Sarah said, we always tell to the children, you see, if you see something, you call a teacher. But we also have like nature guides that has like visuals. We show it to the kids, like some of the kids developmentally, they are able to understand, if you see such and such mushroom, that means it's poisonous, you can touch it. So it's the same thing with poison ivy. We are able to help them identify, poison ivy for safety as well. And then we use we use cones, kind of like just to show them this is the area you kind of go into. This is safe, this is not safe. So with nature guides and visuals, like it kind of brings out a bigger picture for the children to be able to see what's safe and what's not safe and what's not to touch.
They wear yellow vests as well. So we have the orange cones and the yellow vests is our way of keeping track of them. So about every 5 minutes, the teachers are counting them. So, at the beginning of the day at morning circle, we see how many we have. We count them together at morning circle. And then, if you have 9 that day, then every about 5 minutes, the teachers are counting 9.
Yeah. And within every transitions. And it is in our all, I would say we have about 30 different policies. It's like, I'm like, if I send you all these policies, like, I don't think you'll sit there and read all of them. But like, we have specific policies. I will send all of them to you.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
There's safety, there's water safety, there's everything in those different policies that we do have. And we do have to count. It is safety. We have to do head count every other minute, every transition. We have to ensure that we are counting and also communicating with each other. And then we do get surprise visit from the licensors as well through the state. They just come and visit to see how the program is doing, so we do get surprise visits as well. So
yeah, we have a combination of scheduled and surprise visits each year.
Yeah, certainly the more information, the better. And that way we can give the board the information that they need to digest this and vet it through the proper way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I would say that
because we are also the local authority obviously for DEP and septic, but also for DPH. So we just have to make sure that we've dotted our I's. And it's good to hear that you have all these policies, which is great. So, and counting children sounds like a bit more fun than maybe counting gallons of septage, but that's what we get to do.
Yeah, and I would say that, the policies that we share with parents, those policies are in the family handbook. So the family handbook that we share, that's that's what our policies are. That's the information that every parent is receiving before enrollment, they receive that. And they're using this handbook as a way to decide if they would like to enroll in the program or not. So it's a great way for families to read through that and see, okay, are you comfortable with all of this? Okay, great. Now it's time to enroll.
All right, Kathy, I see you have ready to comment.
I just wanted to let everyone know that I met with Zach Ward and another member of his department. We walked the entire property, focusing first on the proposed site for the yurt. But he and I agreed that in the winter to very early spring, we would develop together an overarching safety plan where their crew will actually come and understand ingress and egress. So Where would they bring a vehicle? If they needed to bring a stretcher into the woods, how would they do that? So that they could better understand the site layout here, and that we would then integrate the developed safety plan for the sanctuary itself. This is, separate, but connected to the Boston Outdoor Preschool Network. That way, anybody is served better, whether they're here for volunteering or for an event.
That sounds great.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so, just a little question, since this might come up in terms of how DEP views other aspects of having another building on the property. Is it going to be heated, the yurt? Okay, so the yurt will be heated, but are you planning any plumbing connections to anything for that?
We would use the porta potty and then the gallonage.
And then, okay, and then hopefully the building, if that works out. So, okay. All right, so
Daryl, we'd have to consider the well, also the use of it. And does it become a public
true.
water supply or does it not, based on numbers and so forth? But if the building is to be used, I just thought of that as we were talking, that the septic is one item, but the well would be another area of question. Not to say yes or no, but it will be something that'll have to be looked at once we get.
So that is a head count thing, and
yeah, not just this program, but the entire use of the building, and
yes.
what does it do with the well in respect to classification.
Okay, so sounds like there are a number of areas confirming numbers, and then once we confirm existing numbers, attach the gallonage to that. That'll tell you what's left over for gallonage and how many children and staff can be present. And now for the well issue, Mark can talk to DEP about that. What the options are. I never view this as, it's not just yes or no. It's, again, what choices are made and how things are divided up, or alternative water is provided, or what have you. We just need to understand what the choices could be for this. So, and then I'm going to guess that there's going to be more questions back and forth as Mark, digs into this, and Eric also, and that they work with each other and with DEP on this.
Yeah, and including we'll need, since I just saw the drawing on the yurt, we'll need information on its location in respect to the septic system and the on-site well to make sure there's no interference from it.
Yeah, like it's not on top of the septic system or something.
That goes through the building process, but we can do all that once it gets submitted as a building permit.
Okay, and is that map that I showed a moment ago, is that accurate in terms of location?
Yes, that's the map that the architect drew. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe as a first cut, Mark, if you can compare this to another, and then let us know let them know if they need now yet another map that specifically shows.
The best thing they can do right now is do an overlay of what they're proposing onto the septic plan, the as-built septic plan, so that we can see the distances to the well and to the septic system.
Okay, and Eric should be able to do that, I'm guessing.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I'll just point out that the existing wellhead is marked on this map.
I just can't see it.
It's up in the upper way left hand.
There we are.
The septic system is not even visible on this map. It is off of the entire area.
Well, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from board, Tom, Mark, BOPN, Unity? And again, we'll just, if something comes to mind, just relay that to whomever you think is most appropriate, or to Ellen, and then she can figure out who's most appropriate to get the question or comment.
And
sorry, Ellen.
And Tom asked for the policies that were mentioned, so if they can get those to Ellen, so Tom can get to see
Thank you,
those.
Mark, and forgive me because I was looking over on my phone. I don't know if it wasn't loading, but I seem to have gotten a cut-off version of the SOP. So the ones that were just showed on the screen were a lot more elaborative than the ones I had. So any and all information that's pertinent, I'll take it so we can all look at it together.
Great. And Tom, what's your email? Because I don't think I've been in there's been a few emails that have gone back and forth that shared a lot of resources, and unfortunately I don't think you were on that email chain.
Oh, sure. It's food inspector, one word, at sherbornma.org.
Okay. And is there anyone else that I should make sure is on these email chains?
I would suggest Ellen be on it as well as myself.
Okay. Great. Yeah, and it'd be really helpful just to just to get a list of questions so that we can just go through them one by one and make sure that we're answering all the questions that you have.
Okay. All right. Great.
Thank
So,
you so much.
yes,
sorry,
I'm gonna.
Sorry. If
Yeah,
there's any professionals that we need to hire beyond Eric or the Title V inspection, it'd be great to kind of know about that so we can start getting those services lined up if we need to hire additional people.
Mark, at the moment, I think Eric is probably going to be able to pull together most of what we've talked about.
Okay.
And then for what Tom brought up, really working with Tom in terms of what he needs to review for what he oversees.
Got it. Awesome.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for the additional information. It certainly makes it much more clear now for me, at least.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. So we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much for meeting with us.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right. So Tom, before we cut you loose, heritage update.
Sure. So I have to apologize. I had every intention of traveling out to Sherborn tonight to take a look, but I had some conflicting obligations. But I am in receipt of photos of some corrective actions that Josh has made in the basement area. It seems like he's gone ahead and sealed over those exposed plaster surfaces that were in the dry storage room and on the wall opposite the walk-in cooler and freezers. There is still a wooden rail on the wall. Apparently he's going to be attaching a counter top to that, I think, just as sort of an additional shelf space to store his dry storage items, I presume. I did speak with him tonight over text message, and he did remove the debris that were in the wooden crate in the basement, and that crate is specifically just going to be dedicated for use to store firewood in it. As far as the inspection spec, I know the board had requested the number of re-inspections. I just wanted to clarify if it was just for this specific round of inspections, or did you want me to count the revisits for the calendar year, just so I can have better information that if you would like to, if the board would like to assess a fine.
Okay. I was thinking the calendar year.
Okay. So I can certainly do that in the next couple of days. I'll have to go digging through some files and count those all out for you, and I'll get that information to you as soon as possible.
Okay. Because just for others to think about, and we can discuss this further once Tom has that information and has had a chance to do another inspection. But there are 2 inspections required by the state per year.
Right.
So to me, those are 2 base inspections. And then we usually have allowed, and it's usually only taken 1 follow-up, to check if there were any items identified during the inspection, and then follow up to see that they're resolved. And we've traditionally treated that as just covered by the 1 inspection fee. I'm inclined to think that there might be 4 per year. That would, okay, so that would be 4 inspections covered by 2 inspection fees. And after that, maybe everything else is a re-inspection.
Right.
And then
That's
depending
the
on what the
interest.
number comes out to be, that might be where we think about what time period are we looking at, what have you,
Okay.
but
I know
so
that
it's my-
in my experience is with the risk categories that the state recommends, there is a tier 3 risk category that we usually, if it's high risk foods, like for instance, if they're preparing sushi, they would be inspect 3 times per year, or that's also a tool that we use if the business has chronic violations. So it's safe to say that
Oh, okay.
I kind of have used my discretion to raise them to a 3 times per year risk category, just based on chronic issues.
Okay.
And then if you're absolutely right, you're expected to go back on the follow-up visit and have all of the violations corrected. And if there's ones that, you cannot correct, like for instance, a repair issue, the code allows up to 60 days, contingent on receiving, pertinent information and time frames of completion and quotes. We do grant extension periods. We try to work with people within reason. But I think this has kind of gone awry in this particular case. So I'll have to take that all into account when I do go through the reports and come up with a rough count for the board, to try to assess whatever fee they see fit.
Okay. That sounds reasonable to me. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Tom? Okay. All right. How about that? We're going to be in time for our 7:50. So thank you very much, Tom.
Oh, thank you all.
Okay. All right. So we have a variance hearing for septic replacement at 28 Lake Street. And Ellen, were all the green cards received?
Yes, everything's been received. It's all set. You can open the hearing.
All right. I'll open it in a minute, or half a minute. And let me just bring up the location. Oh, and it's 7:50, so we will open the hearing. And Dan, I see that you are ready to go. So if you just let me know which you'd like me to zoom in on from time to time. But otherwise, if you can explain to us what the reasons are for the variances being requested.
Certainly. Thank you. For the record, Dan McIntyre representing the homeowner, Corrine Lenders. Corrine is in the process of readying her house for sale, and it failed the Title V inspection, so we were retained to design a new septic system. The location of this is 28 Lake. It's right on the corner of Obed Lane, which is a private road up to a house number 10 Obed Lane. It's a gravel road there. It's about a 1 acre lot. It was built in 1957 as a 4-bedroom house, where it's remaining a 4-bedroom house for the new septic system. If you could go down to the main septic plan, yes. So when they built the house back in the 50s, they pushed it all the way back to the rear of the lot. And this was done for what we believe was good reasons at the time. If you want to zoom out a little bit, you can see the entire lot. Lake Street is up at the top of the page. You can see kind of a big blank area there. That is a wooded area which is primarily wetlands. We didn't have it fully delineated because it was far enough away from the only place we could work. And we were trying to keep the homeowners' costs down a little bit. But the stormwater from Lake Street is discharged through swales right onto this property. And if you go by there in the springtime, you'll see it's ponded water up in that area. So we wanted to avoid that, which left us, and the original builders were avoiding that as well, which pushed the house and septic system toward the back of the property. So we're in the same situation. The existing system is located along the back property line. Yeah, that's the property line right there with 10 Obed, which is the house up on the hill. That's really the only location that we could put the new septic system. We did a couple of test pits on either side of the existing system. We found very consistent sandy soils with the groundwater at about 4 feet. We didn't really want to dig any more test pits for fear of damaging the existing system. They also, at some point in time, they put an in-ground pool, which unfortunately is another constraint that we needed to avoid. So basically, we're putting the new system in the same location as the existing system. We are asking for some waivers to the vertical offset to groundwater and some of the horizontal offsets to the on-site well and the wetlands and the property line. We are proposing an alternative technology system, which is approved by DEP for a reduction in the groundwater offset by as much as 2 feet. This is the geomat system. And we're relocating the tanks. The existing tank is under the pool patio. We don't think that's a very good spot for the tank. So we're redoing some of the plumbing and putting the tanks out in the lawn area so it could be better maintained in the future. So the variances that we're looking for is, one is to the well, the on-site well. The existing system is about 100 feet off of that. We're about the same distance as 102 feet. That's a relatively new well. It was replaced in 2014 and was approved at that time for a 100-foot offset to the existing septic system. The abutters well at 10 Obed, which is at the bottom of the page, meets the 150-foot offset. You may recall last year or 2 years ago, that well also dried up. And when we cited that well for the owners, we took into consideration this septic system and made it in compliance with the Sherborn setback regulations. So we don't need any issues with, don't need any variances for the abutters well. We are looking for a reduction in offset of 125-foot distance to the wetlands, which is located, the closest wetland is located on the other side of Obed Lane. We're about 90 feet off of that. And the property line, we're looking for a reduction in the setback to the rear property line from 20 feet down to 11 feet, still being in compliance with Title V. And what else? I think that's it on the variances. Yeah, I mentioned we did only do 2 test pits. Sherborn requires 3. But as I mentioned, we didn't want to damage the existing septic system. And we found very consistent soils through here. The same soils we found at 10 Obed as well when we replaced that septic 5 or 6 years ago. So I think with that, I could turn it over for questions.
All right, I'll just note that, right, with the wetlands, the wet area down here, and the well, and so we're seeing this arc, and then the arc of the neighboring well, really just left with this little corner here.
Pretty much so, Daryl. And the wetlands are over to the far left of the plan that you're looking at.
And it was
And
approved by
so
conservation.
here's the arc for that. So
Yes,
yes, quite a few constraints here.
correct.
So Mark, any other comments you want to add to what Dan had to
No,
say?
Dan did a great job with the presentation. I agree with him. The soils were consistent. They had good perk rates. And I agree with him also that if we even tried to get another deep hole in, we would have probably damaged the existing system. I support the request for the 2 deep holes based on the consistency of the soil.
Okay, and anyone else on the board have any questions or comments? And if there are any abutters present or anyone else who might have a question. Okay. So I guess we will move on to the variances then. So, oops.
We did ask for 1 variance about leaching beds. In discussion with Mark this morning and past practice, I don't think we need that anymore. And actually, Ellen made me change it anyway, so never mind.
Okay.
Ellen picked up on that earlier.
Yeah, it's been under discussion previously with other septic systems, and our regulations state that you can only use a bed if it's being pressured. It's being pumped up to. So there's some debate on if this is considered pressure dosed and or being pumped. But the board had agreed prior that if you're putting in a bed, if a pump system's there, then that would be sufficient because it distributes the effluent throughout the entire system versus it being distributed at the beginning and slowly failing, and beds aren't the best type of system for just a general gravitational flow.
So I think we'll go through the variances one by one. Since everyone can see the writing there, I am going to read the short version, but if anything is unclear and anyone who's attending has a question, certainly, just let us know and we could explain it further. But in the meantime, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 5.1C regarding the number of test pits?
So moved.
So moved. Seconded.
Hey, any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Oops. Rebecca was on. Oh,
Rebecca is here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Rebecca,
But did you vote?
I did.
Oh, okay. Did you say aye
I did.
or nay? Okay. All right. Daryl Beardsley, aye. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01 regarding groundwater offset?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.02 depth to seasonal high groundwater?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.1 regarding the distance to an upgradient well? And that is the on-site well.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2 regarding the property line offset to be 11 feet rather than 20?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, I.
Diana Hook, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. And do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2 regarding wetland offset?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? I'll mention something. So this has gone through Conservation Commission before it gets to us. So they've already reviewed it, and we do rely heavily on them for their evaluation. Okay, ready to vote?
Julie Dreyfus,
Yep.
I.
Diana Hook, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. And for a Title V local upgrade waiver, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 15.4051H? And this is the groundwater offset reduction.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, I.
Diana Hook, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. So we can close the hearing. And Mark, are the plans ready for approval?
Yes, Daryl, they are, but conditional to 2 deed recordings. The first one being for the garbage grinder prohibition, and the second one being for the use of the innovative alternative technology for the septic system being proposed. And just a quick note, we do review these plans during pre-construction, and Dan did a very good job on putting all the needed Conservation Commission items on it as well. So we go over that. And I always let the installer know not to start the system until they get review and approval by Conservation.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to receipt of the 2 deed recordings noted for garbage grinder and innovative alternative technology?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, I.
Diana Hook, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you very much. If I may, 'cause I still got
Sure.
a couple more minutes. I just wanted to ask you about the Title V local upgrade waiver for these systems. These have the same DEP approvals as the Elgin systems, which we no longer request this waiver for. And I'm wondering why we don't do that for all the DEP approved technologies. I think it's applicable to all these technologies, not just the Elgin.
Mark, I think that might be in your ballpark.
Yeah, so you're talking about the distance to groundwater?
Yes, the 2-foot reduction. That's approved in the DEP's remedial use approval for all of these technologies, the Elgins, the FAST systems, the geomats. And I know we've got a letter from Claire specifically on the Elgins, but I'm wondering whether we should get that clarified, because I believe it applies to all of these technologies.
Yeah, it probably is a good idea, though, to get another written letter from DEP that the local upgrade approval is not required. Within the approvals, though, you don't get to have the 3 opportunities usually to lower from groundwater, reduction in size, and I forget the other one right now, but we can find out. We can check with DEP, see if they'll put something in writing that we use the same terminology and waivers and local upgrade approvals as we would for the Elgins. There was something in Elgins just recently in the last year, though, that I don't know what it was, and that's why I need to research it just to see why they're treated a little differently than these other systems. And I think it could
that may be the case then. Okay.
Yeah, Elgins might have gotten approved later in the process, but it's a good question, Dan, and we could get in touch with Claire Golden and see if she might be able to answer your request.
Yeah, I recall discussing this at some point in the past, but I honestly don't remember how long ago that was. So worth a revisit.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, Mark, if you're going to that conference this week, she's probably going to be there.
Yeah, no, that was last week, and
Oh, that was last week?
Yeah, that's okay. I got enough CEUs for the year, but maybe next year. But I'll give her a holler. Thanks, Dan.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. Okay, we have 3 minutes before the next hearing. Oh, I could probably do Charles River Health District update. That's the shared services agreement that we are in with Sherborn, Dover, Medfield, and Needham. And the Needham is the administrative arm of the Charles River Health District. So we had our first formal meeting, but it wasn't completely formal because we couldn't take any votes on anything. When it was set up, it was decided that all 4 towns would have a representative at a meeting at all times to be able to vote on things. And then given that someone was not able to make the meeting, that became apparent that that was not going to be particularly workable. So it was changed that when it's possible for us to vote with 4 members there, or representatives from each town, that we would probably change it or make a motion to change it to be a majority vote, which would be 3 would have to be present for anything other than financial, but any financial decisions, that it would be arranged that all the towns would have to be present for decisions on how funds were allocated, because most of the funds for this are coming from the state. So it's important. Aside from that, let's see. We may have someone who's in the program, they have a health agent to work on septic, but really Dover and Sherborn have lots of septics. Medfield has some, and Needham has very, very few. And at some point, the person that this district has hired to help with that will probably shadow Mark in the field to learn more about how Sherborn does things, and also then do the same in Dover and be able to fill in, say, if Mark would like to take a vacation, or if the Dover health director needs to be away also. So that could be coming. What else? We talked about maybe getting help through the district in terms of evaluating fees, since that's something that this board periodically does, but it's a lot of work for whoever takes that on, is to try to compare across towns, but maybe doing it within the district or getting help again through this project. We're still working on hiring the public health nurse for Dover and Sherborn. Both Needham and Medfield have public health nurses on staff. So we're trying to cover Dover and Sherborn. I think those are the main updates and so Tom, we need to tell Tom that we received the iPad and the software for the food inspections that can be done electronically now. So, and there were some bags dropped off in the Sherborn office. Sorry, forgot to mention that to you, Ellen, when you came back. So.
Yeah, I found those, Daryl, and I'll let Tom know.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so it is now 8:12, and we have a variance hearing for septic replacement at 32 Saddlebrook. And do we have all the green cards, Ellen?
Yes, everything's been received. It's all set.
Okay. And I notice that Eric is here.
Yes.
So, Eric, I'm going to ask you to explain the reasons that the variances are being requested.
Okay.
And is this the map that you'd like to see?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. And I'll just zoom in on the location for a moment.
Okay.
And Daryl, just so you know, these are additional variances from the ones already previously approved by the Board of Health
Yes.
at a previous meeting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, prior 2 meetings ago.
Right.
We had voted. Okay, so
Okay.
here's the location.
Yeah. So it's at the last meeting, I excluded 2 local, actually it's 3 local variances, upgrade approval variances on their section 5.1C, 5.2, and 8.02.
Yeah, and these are local,
Yeah.
the local codes. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Yeah, the local. So 5.1C, we kind of went over these, but it's to allow a reduction in the minimum depth of 3 test pits due to the groundwater intrusion and side walls were sloughing off. The site had very, very poor soils with a lot of fill. The 3 total test pits were dug in the vicinity of the proposed soil absorption system. You can see test pit 1, 2, and 3 along the, right there. Test pit 1 was the only pit in which a full 5 feet of naturally occurring soil could be measured. Test pit 2 and 3 had depths of 4.3 and 4.2 respectively. No refusal was encountered to a depth of about a foot below each test pit. They were just filling in with water as we were digging, so you couldn't really, it's just pouring in and the walls are caving in as you're digging, so you couldn't achieve a good depth. So that was from section 5.1C. That was the first variance request. The second is 5.2. That's to allow the percolation rate as determined by a laboratory particle size analysis to be greater than 40 minutes per inch. The soil was decided in the field, it was uncompacted. It wasn't a tight soil at all. It was sloppy, to say the least. The laboratory assigned the USDA textural class of the soil as a silt loam, which is the worst type of soil you could have for a septic system, really. It correlates to 60 minutes per inch percolation rate and an effluent loading rate of 0.15 gallons per day per square foot. The replacement soil absorption system was designed accordingly per Title V. So that was section 5.2. And lastly, this is a neat one, section 8.02, to allow reduction in the maximum groundwater level of 5 feet below the natural surface. Given the amount of fill encountered in all 3 test pits, which they were 60, 68, 66, we could not determine exactly where the natural surface was actually located. The fill was wavy and it was just, like I said, the side walls were sloughing off and it was very, very wet soil. So those are the 3 local variances that I excluded.
Okay, so I'm assuming that explains the perk rate, especially explains the size of this system.
Correct.
Okay, so it is larger than what we usually see.
Yeah.
Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. And Daryl, you just mentioned it, and thankfully, Eric decided to use innovative alternative technologies here, because if he didn't, that septic system probably would have taken up a good portion of the backyard. So, but he has now updated the septic plan to include the required waivers, and I would recommend to the board that you go through the process for the approval of the new additional waivers that were added.
Okay, and Rebecca?
Yeah, I just have a question for the engineers to educate me. So when this happens,
Yeah.
do you think that just that this increase in size of the septic system can compensate for the naturally occurring conditions to achieve what we need?
Yeah, because when you send it to the laboratory, they assign that loading rate, and that's what you use as your for sizing criteria.
Is there any special like follow-up
Testing or anything?
advice when this circumstance happens for the homeowner? Because it's unusual. I mean, it's just tricky when the perk rate is so big.
Except when he's talking about the rates of application, I mean, that was, did you say 0.15 gallons per square foot? Was that what you
Right,
mentioned?
exactly.
That's specified by DEP. So they've already worked out all of that. Depending on what your perk rate is, affects how much land you need to be able to absorb that amount of water.
But we're getting, I mean, we're still not meeting the local regs. So I'm just asking the engineers if they feel like we need to give special advice to the homeowners for the future, just because it doesn't exactly fit, because we still need to give variances.
Right. It will, well, since it's an IA system, it will be monitored. There's two, I think it's a biannual. And then that report is given to both the Board of Health and the DEP. So they will monitor it to make sure it's functioning properly. In reality, this was probably just a filled wetland, before Title V. So should a home be built there? Or, I mean, by today's standards, no, but you don't really have a lot of, there's not a lot of option there with the well radiuses and the wetlands. I think that I know that this system is upwards to $100,000. So I imagine that the homeowner will maintain it properly and would not want to go through this again.
And I believe some things that they could do would be certainly not pour any oils down.
Right.
Right. Minimize what kind of chemicals might be used that could disrupt the biological processes out there that'll help break things down.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I was
the
thinking.
field.
Yeah,
that's a good
that's
question.
good. That's good, Daryl. Thanks. That's what I was thinking about. Can we give them extra advice? Like, I was giving sort of extra advice to a patient today about one of their medical conditions, because I know that maybe it'll make a difference, but it is like a little thing that's hard to quantify and isn't standard. But I was just curious because they're also the people who have, very limited options. And so I was just wondering, as a Board of Health, if we can help them in that way. And I think maybe that something like that might be good for us to do. But
That's
maybe
a good
you
point.
do that already, Mark, when you talk to them about it, or the engineer who they hire, Mr. Dickinson.
Yes,
that is conducted. And I do a house inspection and final grade inspection at the same time. And we do post it as built in the house with precautionary statements about the fact they should pump the system or inspect it once a year, as well as any discussion. The only time that would not work is if it's a new house and we don't know who the new owners are yet. But we always post the as-built with the precautionary statements so they'll see it and realize, one, they have a septic system and that it needs to be inspected at least once a year.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I see that the homeowner's on as well, so.
Okay, and does anyone else on the board have any comments? And is there anyone else here in attendance who has a comment or a question? Okay, then we will move on to the variance requests. And so these will be essentially added to what we had already granted. And again, I will do just an abbreviated review, but if anyone wants to dive into the depths of each variance, which you can read here, but we can also discuss, then just raise your hand, let me know. Okay, so do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 5.1C regarding the minimum depth of test pits?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 5.2 regarding percolation rate and how it was determined, and also the 60-minute that was found?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. And do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.02 regarding maximum groundwater level?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. So we'll close the hearing, and
Thank you.
sorry, I didn't review. So last time, did we already vote on any deed recordings?
No, we do
No,
need to
you did
get
not.
plan approval. Correct.
Okay.
So.
All right, good, thank you. So is the plan ready for approval?
Yes, it is conditional to the 2 deed recordings, one for the garbage grinder prohibition, and the other one is for the use of alternative technologies, innovative alternative technologies.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to receipt of the garbage grinder and IA technology deed recordings?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Nick. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's do the Laurel Well update, and then we'll end with the Farm Road comments.
Okay. I did receive an email from the well drillers, and I inquired because I've been down to, well, one, I asked the town administrator the status, and he said they would be drilling starting last week. And they were drilling the first well, which is closest to the power lines. And that well was completed last Friday. And they said the final depth was 593 feet. And they did what they call an airlift to determine the well yield. And that was 2 to 4 gallons per minute. They're presently drilling well number 2. At present, they don't have any information on the water production. But once that well is completed, then they will contact our department to set up our official well pump testing. And then there'll be more information coming after that, including the water quality testing as well.
Yes, I think the yield wasn't looking to be what they were hoping for on the first well, correct?
I believe so. I think they were looking for more production than that, but they stopped drilling at that depth of 500 plus feet. So I'm not for sure what their decision will be, but I'm sure they're hoping to get more water from well number 2, but we'll see.
And Mark, I'm sorry. I should
No,
have
go ahead.
waited
I was
my
going to
turn.
ask if
I'm
anyone
sorry.
had a question.
Mark, can you refresh my memory? How far apart are these wells and their kind of their approximate site within the field?
Yeah, and I have that in my emails, but let me just pull the plan. And I think they're 300 feet apart, or close to that. The well driller, the engineer who designed the plan originally put the wrong number, but they're 292.9 feet apart, so close to 300 feet apart. And what was the other question, Julie?
Oh, I was just because I don't recall ever seeing any type of a site plan as to where they're located. Maybe we did that and I just don't recall
we did
it, but
a
I was
long
just
time
trying to
ago.
imagine.
Yeah, towards I think the end of August it was approved, and and they're, well, if you're down there, you'll see the power lines going up towards Rockwood, the road up above it. And one well is very close to the end of the field near that power line. And then you have to go 300 feet, give or take, to the right if you're looking at it when you're coming in. And that's where the other well is located, towards the back. In fact, if you want to go down, they fenced in the area for the well drilling they did at well number 1, and and I'm sure they'll do the same for well number 2, but you're welcome, if you want to go down, you probably get a better idea of what it looks like. But man, we can get you a plan of the well plan if you'd like that as well. A lot of wells in that state. Sorry.
But no, I was just gonna say it's because I was just trying to recall. It's been a little while since we've talked about this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was just checking my files for a copy of those plans, but I haven't found it yet. So, okay.
I could hold them up to but I don't think they'll come out well if I hold the plans up. Okay. They are on file though. We can get those to you if you need them.
Okay, so comments to the ZBA. So on Tuesday, November 7th, is the ZBA meeting. It's a Zoom meeting. And is anyone else able to or planning to attend? I'll go. I'm planning to go to the meeting.
Oh, I could also attend.
I could also attend.
All right. So, and I'm not sure about Matt. I haven't heard from him, but a question could be whether we post this as a Board of Health meeting, which would allow us to deliberate there. But it would also mean that then Ellen would need to attend this meeting for another night, and then prepare minutes from the meeting. So
unless you don't deliberate, you can attend, but not deliberate. But you could each give comments directly to the ZBA.
And I guess another choice would be to delegate, to have some discussion now about whether we have agreement on points, and then to delegate someone to represent the Board of Health. So I don't know how you'd like to do it.
I'm interested in listening in. So maybe we should just post it as a meeting so that we can all attend, or we just don't talk to each other.
Well, once we post it, then, well, Ellen, I guess you could just listen to it, a recording. Would that work? Make it any easier?
Not really.
Okay. I mean, time-wise, then wouldn't have to do it at night, but and I know it's a lot of extra work.
It's another set of minutes. But I could just reference the ZBA minutes.
Oh.
And say, just see the ZBA, you know, you'd have to call the Board of Health meeting to order. When the discussion about Farm Road homes begins, have the roll call vote. Then you can participate all you want. When it's over, you would have to have a roll call vote to adjourn the Board of Health part of the ZBA meeting. And for the discussion, I can just reference, see the ZBA minutes for the discussion.
Okay.
And there'd be literally nothing in the Board of Health minutes other than when you called it to order and when you adjourned it.
Okay. Does that sound reasonable to others? Just because Ellen's time is so tight. If she was, you know, propping her feet up on the desk, but she never could even come close to doing that. So.
Oh yeah, it's true. I'm a little confused in terms of, do we then among ourselves deliberate, or we're just attending?
Oh, so what it would enable us to do is, as we're at the ZBA meeting, something comes up for discussion, and we would be able to just say, how do we feel about it? Can we come to a consensus on a particular point? I don't know what that might be at the moment, but it would give us a chance to talk to one another and then say, okay, and we could even have a little vote among ourselves to then say, okay, this is where we fall on that issue as a board. Otherwise, we'd be speaking as individuals, which makes it a little harder for the ZBA to then act on recommendations from us.
Would we pause their meeting and say, okay, Board of Health, we need to come together and
in a way, they're going to open their meeting, and then we're going to open our meeting. And so there are going to be two meetings essentially going on at the same time. It has happened before where there's been this kind of arrangement, joint meetings. So it gives us a little more flexibility. I don't want us to feel forced, if it's complex, to make any hard and fast decisions at the meeting, because they've been discussing this for several meetings, and the peer reviewers have already done their review of well and septic issues for both this, for Farm Road homes and for Greenwood homes as well, which I didn't even realize that they were discussing Greenwood already at the ZBA hearing. So it's been bundled. We knew that Farm Road was being discussed at the same time that our meetings were going on. So there's been a lot going on that we haven't been able to participate in directly. And the posting of the Farm Road homes peer review just went up this morning. So I was writing up notes about what I felt were the major issues, but now there's the peer review to take into account too. So I figured we'd walk through what I had already, but now I feel like it might be amended a bit as a result. And same with Greenwood. So we may end up discussing Greenwood at that meeting. But again, if we need to do some more thinking or research and can't do it all at that meeting, we can at least be gathering information, exploring things, discussing what we do know. And I could go over like just generally what I think some of the points are going to be, at least from my review of the materials and the information that we have so far. The other thing is that we don't have final septic plans in front of us yet for Farm Road Homes. We are receiving that's come in for Greenwood, just to let you know. But I believe we still need information from Conservation Commission on that, and Mark needs a chance to review it. So we have a little bit more information, but we don't have all the details that we would normally have in front of us. But I could show you peer review. Okay, so here are the comments on the water supply. And then there's someone's, yes?
Can I ask a question? This is
Sure.
a procedural question before we get into the details of the points. I think that it would be fine to have us vote for somebody to represent the Board of Health, and then if somebody goes to the board, just represent their own opinion. Then you don't have, because I don't think that it would be, I don't think it makes sense for us to have a little mini vote in the middle of their meeting. Do you?
I think it's okay, but I actually like your point. Let's say we don't end up having a quorum. Then we've posted a meeting and we haven't delegated someone to speak on behalf of the Board of Health. So maybe we could do both. We could designate someone, and then we could also arrange, post a meeting. But then if we don't get quorum, we don't get quorum. If something comes up for someone and they can't be there, then whoever is there can speak as an individual who happens to be on the Board of Health. Does that sound workable?
I think
I might have a staff meeting and I have to confirm that before I can commit to going. But if I'm available,
then sounds like we should definitely do designate somebody because the likelihood of getting a quorum is less certain. All right, so right now it looks like Diana and I are planning to go, and I'm certainly happy to be a representative. Diana, I don't know if you want that on your shoulders at the moment, but.
You're muted, Diana.
I second that motion. I think I'd like to attend just to do, I think I have a bit more to learn. So yes, if you were to represent the Board of Health, I would be quite comfortable with that.
Okay,
I agree with Diana. And same thing, Diana. I think I'm not positive if I can come. And I certainly, especially now that the peer review is out, I have more that I need to learn. I think in most cases when a meeting is posted, it's just so that there isn't an accidental violation of open meeting law. And it sounds like we're covering our bases posting. And then if there's just no quorum, there's no quorum. If there's no minutes, there's no minutes. And then we have the plan B where Daryl will speak on behalf of the board. Okay. I think we did everything. It's perfect.
Okay, so there was a second, but there was no motion.
Oh.
So let's start over.
So should we move to appoint the chair to represent the Board of Health at the upcoming ZBA Greenwood Homes and Farmwood Homes comprehensive permit hearing? Did I get that close? Ellen?
Second it.
Okay.
Second the motion.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye. Okay, so let me just go over a couple of things. One of the major questions is on the water supply, whether it's a series of private wells that are shared by multiple units, that fall under the 25 people per well threshold that would trigger automatic or require a public water supply, or whether it is a public water supply, which could be done a number of ways, but we'll get into that in just, well, I'll just start with that. So it could be these 7 distinct wells that are scattered across the property, and I'm pretty sure each one is expected to tie into maybe 4. Well, that can't be, because 7 times 4, that doesn't work out. Must be 4 and 5, something. Some number of units, it comes out to less than 25 people based on 2 people per bedroom. They would then be regulated by us in terms of what the setback distances are from septic fields and from property lines and other things. The project proponent had a document that they had provided that indicated that the unit owners, I don't know if they're, would organize around setting up mechanisms to accumulate funds to be able to make any kind of repairs as needed, or ongoing maintenance, and or water testing on a routine basis. And those are things that could be done by the public water supply system. Once you get regulated as a public water supply by Mass DEP, they have requirements for exactly that kind of thing, because they know that shared water supplies among private entities gets very difficult when it comes time to make a fix on something, because some people may want to do it, some don't. It goes into deliberation for a long time, or disagreements about how something should be done, or some people have monies ready at the time that the crisis arises, others don't. So they have a whole system in DP that designates setting aside escrow funds and kind of how you have to accumulate that at what rate, and it starts to build up funds over time. It's almost like a fee structure in a way for your water supply. So it'd be like paying a utility if you were in an area with a municipal water supply system. And then the other thing that Mass DEP does is it has a system all set up for, here's the testing that you need to do, here's when you need to do it. You need to use a certified lab. All the certified labs already have the software and the programs and mechanisms to just upload that data right into DEP. DEP reviews it, so there's a whole support system for tracking, and it's made pretty easy, actually, in that respect. So these 7 wells that are being proposed, when the peer reviewer did its evaluation here, what they're basically saying is, well, it can be a private water supply. DEP said that it didn't meet the criteria, and I'll explain why it didn't meet the criteria, but it didn't meet the criteria to become regulated as a PWS. And then they go on to say, and I'll make it brief, but this is, this whole discussion here, that it would just be way more costly to do that, to have a PWS than to have these private wells. And I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think they're comparing
which
excuse me?
Which part do you not agree with?
I don't agree that it would be necessarily a lot more expensive, because they're talking about down here, point A, they're looking at a PWS as being one giant well. And I think they're comparing the cost of one giant well to one private well. But I think that the cost of all those individual private wells for the installation side might be pretty similar to the cost for installing one larger well. So that's kind of one piece, and we're not supposed to regulate based on cost, but cost is a kind of a factor in the background. I don't know how the comprehensive permit considers cost for things, but so that's one thing. And in terms of some of these, the zones and the radius and what have you, we actually have a bigger requirement for radius around a well than does public water supply for these, the level of well that would be those 7. There would be smaller, but our radius tends to be bigger. So, and then they're talking about, well, it would be hard to site a single giant well on that property because the zone 1 around it, which is the protective radius, does get large when you're drawing a lot of water just from one. And once you try to place, we haven't really done this yet, but it happened lots of times in the past where when large projects were looked at in the past. Once you put a well of a certain size and try and fit it on a property and you draw the circle around it, you end up eliminating most of the property for building. So it does get tricky. But what they could do on this property is interlink the 7 private wells, which is something they haven't considered. They're locked into this idea that PWS is one well and a backup well. But there are well fields, and what makes it a PWS? What would turn these 7 private wells into a PWS is piping that collects the water from the 7 wells and runs it to a single point and then redistributes it out to the whole project. An advantage of that, which I think is a big advantage potentially, is that there's going to be a density of development here. You're going to have wells that are drawing a fair amount that are close to one another. A few times in town, there have been wells that have gone in where neighbors see the effect of the new well on their well. So I would imagine that there could be some linkages between these 7 wells where, unless we get them to do really good pump testing, which is something I think we need to recommend if they go with these 7 private wells, is they might be connecting to the same bedrock fractures. And so you can't test them one at a time because one's going to produce water and then you move and you test the next one and then it's pulling the water. But if you pump test all at once, you are more likely to see what kind of dynamics there are between those wells. So anyway, so an advantage of running 7 different wells and then connecting them into one point and redistributing is that if any one of those wells doesn't produce well over time, like maybe just by position, another one is able to pull the water more easily than that one. Maybe some people would be struggling to get water at this project and others would have ample water. Or maybe one well would be find contaminants and others wouldn't. So by sharing, you raise the resilience of the whole project rather than having a community where some people have no water and all their other neighbors do. I mean, that would just be a rather miserable situation, I think. So that's one advantage. Also, if the recommendation was to develop funds, I think the amount of funds that might need to be set aside, there is some economy of scale of more and what have you, because some repairs to things are more of a fixed cost, but if you're all spreading that out over a bigger group, that could work out better. And the testing especially, you would be periodically testing the raw water supply. So that would be the supply at each individual well, but that doesn't have to take place as frequently as the finished water, which would be the combined water. So rather than repeating the same suite of tests on all 7 wells, you would do that periodically, but more frequently be doing just the finished water. And that would save overall on the cost of testing. So I think there might be another approach that could be taken with this. And this would definitely fall into the ZBA's prerogative on how they looked at that. Oh, and then once the results are found, let's say if it was private water supplies and they wrote something into the legal documents for this project on how the units are supposed to operate, which seems to be what was proposed. Who's going to follow up on that and see that it's regulated? We don't have any rules for governing that. DEP does for PWSs, but we do not. And we also don't have the staff to do that. I think it would offer them greater protection in that regard as well.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we know what the perk rate is of the lot on Greenwood? Did Mark know that?
Well, right now I'm talking about Farm Road. This is Farm Road.
Yeah.
Because that's what's on our agenda. I just wanted to let you know that I just learned that Greenwood is also being discussed at the same time, but we don't have it on our agenda tonight.
Oh, okay. So a question that I'm going to ask in the future, so maybe I can ask Mark to get that for me, or is what was the perk rate on that lot?
Okay, so you know what? Let's also, Mark, if you can just note that, but
Sure. Yeah,
that might also be an agenda
so
item for the next
I won't
meeting.
talk about it. It's one of the things I know I sound like a broken record and I say this all the time. We have a challenge because we can make efforts to give good advice to protect, if assuming that there is a method of enforcing or ensuring that things are actually done the way we hope they will be. We are also our responsibility is challenging because although maybe we can do some things like the shared well system that you're discussing and the way to connect them to enhance the quality and supply of water of the individual residents of a particular project, we also have the problem of private systems with no fallback plan if its own septic system contaminates its own drinking water and or its neighbors. And when it's wet, I mean, that is the problem. And I feel bad for down gradient abutters who are, just going through life and all of a sudden their water gets contaminated by some random project that happens years after they buy
Okay, so that sounds like a bigger discussion.
Yeah.
Other than this, well, and perk rate doesn't relate to water supply.
No, but perk rate.
So it's not that, and it's not specifically Farm Road. This is like a bigger issue, and maybe we should add that to the agenda, a future agenda. But I don't know that it fits here, other than
except that
what does fit is that on there. Okay, so they also addressed septic system to some degree, and they had some comments that were reasonable, and what we have made for, I would say, every single larger scale project that has occurred in town. And we have regulations for EHIR. And so, but it's a town level regulation. The environmental health impact, well, it's impact assessment, and then the EHIR is the report that, you know, reveals all that was assessed.
We know that we
and
all
so
agree.
I think that's something that we should be asking for this project, because again, there is a density of effluent that's going to come from the one large septic system that's going to be there, and that's going to create a dense plume, as we've seen elsewhere. And there is a process that DEP has established for evaluating the really the long-term steady state level of contaminants that you might find in groundwater as a result of a discharge like this. So that would be certainly one of the things I'd advocate for. We've advocated for it every other time. So
Yeah,
it would not be a departure.
When you're done, I would love to finish my sentence.
Okay. Well, partly I was bringing it up because I'm trying to take what you're saying and apply it to what's on the agenda,
yes,
which is this. I don't want to go too far down the explanation because it's not on our agenda, and that would be a violation of open meeting law. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to say, but I feel very strongly that it's important to have affordable housing. Obviously, Sherborn has to meet a threshold anyway, but I also feel really strongly as a physician that we need to make sure the drinking water is safe and that we don't contaminate our butters. And so I'm not intending to preach to the choir, but that's why I sometimes ask questions and bring issues up that are not always well received.
It's not that they're not at this moment, it's completely well received. I just mentioned that the EHIR is the translation of what you're saying in a general way to this specific project that's going to be discussed at ZBA and the other project, both of them. And that's why we have that EHIR and why we expanded its application in our regulations a bunch of years ago. And then we just refined it further in the most recent round of updates. So yes, I think that's what we always strive for. Okay, so that's one of the other major issues, though, is the EHIR and asking that be applied. And again, the peer reviewer brought up some of the concerns that we have. They didn't express it in the same way, and they didn't advocate for the application of our regulations. But we can certainly ask ZBA to consider requiring that as part of the comprehensive permit and make our pitch for that. Let's see. Other matters. I have to check my notes. Does anyone have any other comments while I look for?
So I haven't had a chance to read the peer review, Daryl, so I really can't until I've read through. I don't think I can necessarily give a lot of comments. I am struck by, I agree with all of the points that you made about the oversight and onus being kind of, there is an overarching umbrella that facilitates proper management and maintenance and testing. And I recall in the ZBA hearing, whatever month it was, October or something like that, a resident who talked about over and another project where it was shared, it was like 6 or 7 units who were sharing the system, how daunting that was, even though it was shared.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking about, you know, depending on how transient the community may or may not be, how long it takes for properties to sell, it just feels like it is a higher burden on those individual homeowners having a shared system that they have to manage with a few of their neighbors, compared to, you know, anyone who just has a single family home where they're making a decision based for their household, for their one well. It definitely seems harder.
Right. That's a good point, because with the public water supply, and the requirements vary depending on the complexity of that public water supply. So there are loads of examples of condo buildings or apartment buildings that have a public water supply, and it's not impossible for them to manage that. And it does make it easier when then those well users who are part of the PWS just plug into a system that the DEP has worked out over decades. As opposed to, as you said, people coming together, and then what if for each of those wells, you might have 7 different groups coming up with 7 different arrangements. And so then just by quirk of which unit, a future user buys, a future homeowner buys, they might have a different system of how that well is managed than if they had bought, the unit across the street. So it could just lead to all sorts of trouble over time, I think. So the other thing that we can certainly raise is, our current favorite topic, bedrock disruption, and whether that might be encountered, bedrock might be encountered during the development of this project, and then best management practices around that. So
again, having not read this, I feel like I'm not current, but I am most of the way through the last ZBA hearing on YouTube. And at least what the developer had said was that if they encounter ledge, that they would not be putting in basements.
Yeah.
And that the decision to put in basements would be dependent upon whether or not they encountered ledge. And there was also, if I'm recalling this correctly, and if anyone else has listened to it and remembers differently, correct me, that in they didn't drill anywhere on the raised elevation portion, but on the lower elevation is where they did do test poles, and they didn't find ledge, but they didn't.
Right. Just anecdotally, in the past, we had heard that prior owners of the property had done some exploration when they wanted to put another house or create another lot, and had found a lot of ledge, but we don't have any records on that at all. So it's just hearsay at this point. So,
it's agreed. It's hard to imagine that on a hill.
Okay, I think those are they've been doing stormwater usually, even though we have some requirements for stormwater, we typically don't get as involved because other groups in town are much more involved in that, certainly the Conservation Commission. So kind of the usual water quality and quantity protection. So I think we've gone over maybe 4 items. So it's public versus private water supply, the pump testing, having adequate pump tests, no matter which way they go. So that would address quantity. Of course, they're going to have to do water quality testing no matter what. So that'll be taken care of either way. Again, the local boards of health are the only regulators for private water supplies. That's it. There is no state default. So they at least have to meet our basic regulations. And then for the septic, Mark still needs to be able to review what's there for us to even know what things might be deviating or not from local regulations, and therefore what we might need to ask for above and beyond Title V. Because this project is over, for the septic is over 2,000 gallons a day, it has to do mounding analysis for Mass DEP. And then the question is, has the mounding analysis been done properly? So that might be something to ask whether the peer reviewer has the technical ability to do that, to check on the mounding analysis performed by the applicant. And then bedrock disruption and EHIR. So maybe there are more than 4. And if anyone thinks of anything else,
Well, I would question the use of a different soil type for groundwater determination. I'd have to also check to see if they had any modeling signs of groundwater from colors in the soil, because that would be the best indicator of groundwater. But I have not seen the septic plans yet to see what soil testing they're using for that proposed leaching area.
Yeah. Right, that'll be, once you get a chance to see the details of the plan, that is probably going to open up a bunch of other issues. Right, depth of groundwater, perk rates, all sorts of things. Okay, and presumably, you know, the 7th is not the final opportunity for us to weigh in, but I was concerned that so much analysis had been done and discussion had gone on, more than I thought. It was just more than I expected. Okay. All right. I think there was something else. Actually, I thought this was the last item, but there was, agenda items and water testing of rental units.
Yeah, so I would, I actually didn't realize it was on the agenda. So I didn't submit I was going to submit it before the meeting so you could review it, my proposed wording.
Okay, we can just move it to another.
Yeah.
The next one?
Yeah, sure. That would be great. I apologize. I didn't realize it was on the, I mean, I guess we did discuss it, but when I looked at the agenda, when it first came out, I didn't see it. So I didn't send it to you.
Okay. All right. So next time. All right. So we'll move that item onto the next agenda, and let's see.
Oh, okay. Darn it.
Do we have variance hearings, Ellen, for the next meeting?
No, I don't believe there are any.
Oh my.
So maybe we can have proposed wording for rental units and also for potential revisions to
bedrock disruption.
Bedrock disruption, and there was another one that I wanted to propose.
Well, write them out, because the other thing is, I mean, it was a long time. Is everyone refreshed enough to tackle regulatory updates again?
Can we make a general category proposed?
No, we can't be just general.
Amendments to regulations?
We could, but only to talk about whether we want to then consider pursuing amendments to them. Well, but we shouldn't have a substantive discussion about what the amendments are until we can specify them.
Well, okay.
Does that make sense? It'd be 2-step.
I can't remember what the third one was that I want to make. So the first, I can give specific subjects. The first one is the testing for rental units. And the second is ledge disruption. And then the third one, I can't remember. But I can tell you if with due time before the meeting.
Okay.
But I think, don't we need a draft proposed change?
Yes,
Not
we do
just the
need-
topic.
yeah.
Excuse
So-
me?
We
You would
want
need-
proposed language that we deliberate, just like we did the last few
That's what
times
I
that
was
we've done
going to do,
regulatory
but I need to
updates.
submit it in advance so you have time, everybody has time to review it, which is
Yes,
why
okay. So if you can get that in very soon to Ellen, then she will know how to word the.
what is the date of the next meeting?
It's right there,
The
11/15.
So what would be a reasonable date?
Next Wednesday.
Is 10 too late?
What?
Tell me the date that you want it by.
Next Wednesday, the 8th.
Okay. I have to go to, I have to drive to New York for a wake tomorrow. So that's why I'm asking. Because I can't do it tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect.
All right.
And we should be discussing the pump testing for Laurel. Will that be coming up at the next meeting if they're doing the well now, the second well?
We can have another Laurel well update, I think.
I can, yeah, definitely, we can keep that on. That's
We're
fine.
probably going to have Heritage of Sherborn pending. I think Tom would probably have more information by then. And we need to talk about Greenwood because that, again, I learned after we formulated the agenda that Greenwood was moving ahead.
Mhm.
But has the
And
peer
Greenwood is the
peer-
4 houses on Greenwood Lane. They're in the plans I remember seeing in the past. I don't know what the current proposal is, but they were basically 4 nearly identical houses, maybe flipped, mirror images or something, but one of which would be an affordable unit. So, and that one is less complex than some of these others. It's maybe more in some of the variances that they're looking for. Also posted, so on the new website, when you go to sherbornma.org, it looks very different, but there is a box on the right-hand side, just a little bit down, that says land development, and there are documents posted there, and Jeannie said she's still in the process of moving them over because they have been adding documents, or they've had to manually move them over from the old system to the new system.
That sounds painful.
Yeah. And she was adding a lot today because that's when I saw the peer review reports when I had been looking at that site before and not seeing them. So it was a surprise. Okay, so Greenwood, Heritage, that. Okay. Could that be it? Ready to adjourn? Would anyone like to make the motion?
I move to adjourn.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Have
Thank
a
you,
good
everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you and good night.
Right.